All right, folks, how you doing? Welcome back. So this is the Cast No Shadows, Part 1, taken from the book of the same name by author Brian Desborough, who was a major influence on David Icke. You'll see that when we go through this. In fact, I consider this presentation to be almost like a coda, in a way, to Mars Atlantis and the Hollow Earth. So, disclaimer, under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976, allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. We begin with education. Through the centuries, education has become ever increasingly specialized, with the result that it is political suicide for a college professor to venture into a field of research beyond his or her defined field of expertise. Educators generally have become so compartmentalized within their own elected areas of expertise that they lack the broad knowledge base which is necessary for the education of students. Ancient Egyptian civilization. Egyptologists realize that ancient Egyptian civilization lacked the customary developmental period, yet have failed to name the race of beings who provided Egypt with its ready-made culture. This academic shortcoming is attributable to two things. Firstly, it is anathema for a member of academia to suggest that planet Earth has been subject to repeated cataclysmic upheavals, and secondly, Egyptologists are not permitted to research the culture of other races, e.g., the Phoenicians, if they wish to remain employed. The Phoenicians, speaking of that, by observing the world around us with unprejudiced eyes, it is readily apparent that both Earth and the planet Mars have been subjected to a cataclysmic event in geologically recent times, which is why recorded history only extends over the past 6,000 years. As the research conducted by the author of this book reveals, it was the Phoenicians who undoubtedly re-established civilization in Egypt and in some other geographic regions after the last global catastrophe. A gigantic Chladni structure. So sadly, geologists, archaeologists, and historians have ignored the abundance of evidence that this is so, because the facts do not fit the accepted chronological table of historical events. The solar system appears to be, in actuality, a gigantic Chladni structure, formed by standing waves created in the solar gravitational field through the interaction of a broad spectrum of etheric waves. Each standing wave node will possess its own gravitational field, with planets being held at the primary nodes and objects of lesser mass, e.g., asteroids, being captured by secondary and tertiary nodes. The polar axis of Earth and Mars. Astronomers claim that the solar system was created through the condensation of a spinning cloud of stellar dust. If this were the case, then the axis of all the planets which comprise our solar system should lie on the same plane of rotation. If the solar system has remained in a steady state since its formation, this is clearly not the case, however, for the polar axis of Earth and Mars are tilted almost 30 degrees from their orbital planes. The Haji Ahmed Portolan map. That an advanced civilization once existed in prehistoric times is beyond doubt, as is evidenced not only by sacred geometry in the design of the Great Pyramid, but also by the Haji Ahmed Portolan map. The map depicts the North American continent, replete with a wide natural land bridge connecting Alaska and Siberia, and an accurate outline of an ice-free Antarctica, suggesting that an ancient race possessed superb surveying and map-making skills. Nikolai Ivanovich Vavilov. A major anomaly of the past that has been ignored by academia is the work of botanist Nikolai Ivanovich Vavilov. A global cataclysm destroyed all vegetation in lowland regions of the planet. In order to identify the mysterious and technologically advanced race who gave Egypt its civilization and bestowed a legacy in the form of the Great Pyramid, we must reconstruct the patterns of the past which currently are obscured. A global flood. Previously, we saw that a global flood and ice age apparently occurred simultaneously only 6,800 years ago. This catastrophic event literally changed the face of the Earth, possibly destroying an advanced civilization in the process. After accomplishing this task, we must then establish a meaningful rationale for building the Great Pyramid. The Mars Pathfinder mission. So, the recent Mars Pathfinder mission has revealed that the rocks on the Martian landscape lack sufficient erosion to have been on the Martian surface for more than 10,000 years. The Martian terrain is scarred with very deep canyons, which academia claims were gouged out by massive torrents of water flowing thousands of miles across the Martian surface and emanating from subterranean geothermal sources. Well, that's actually a complete load of pish. The scars on Mars are from its battle with Venus, but that's subject for another time. The canyons of Mars. The Martian surface is so incredibly cold that water would only flow for a very short distance from its source before freezing. Moreover, the near vacuum of the Martian atmosphere would cause water to instantly vaporize. Like I said, it's a load of pish. If the canyons of Mars were indeed created by large volumes of water, Mars at one time must have enjoyed a much warmer climate, much closer to the Sun. The vicinity of Stonehenge. So there was an era when the climate of the planet Earth was so hot that only dark-skinned races could survive on its surface, as would be the case if Earth once orbited closer to the Sun. Ancient skeletons discovered in the vicinity of Stonehenge and along the western coast of France display the nasal foci and statiopygic spinal deformation characteristic of many female Africans. Am I saying those words right? Foci, statiopygic, I don't know. Maybe I'm mispronouncing that. Apologies if I am. A wayward comet. I never believed that Venus is a comet because that is a load of shite. A comet is the core of a dead planet. How can a dead planet come back to life again? Is it a zombie comet? But anyway, the true formation of Venus is covered in another source, but we'll just roll with this for now. Planet Earth orbited closer to the Sun. I do believe that. Mars originally occupied our present orbit. Again, I also believe that. Possessing too much residual angular momentum to become a permanent satellite of our planet Venus, originally a wayward comet. Nope, it's not a comet, it's something else. Finally entered into its present orbit, displacing our planet in the process. Listen, like I say, a comet is the core of a dead world. Dead worlds don't come back to life. They fuel other living worlds, but they don't spring back to life. They're not zombies. The Earth in turn displaced Mars, the latter's present orbit being too far from the Sun to sustain life. El-Khahira, Mars, and the pyramidal structures in the Cydonia region of Mars, I beg your pardon, if the pyramidal structures in the Cydonia region of Mars prove to be artificial constructs, we are left to ponder whether the pyramid builders of Mars were sufficiently technologically advanced to abandon their planet and relocate on Earth. Yeah, of course they were, spawning the various Indo-Aryan cultures. The Gizo Plateau was formerly named El-Khahira, derived from the Arabic noun El-Khahir, meaning Mars. The Lyrian constellation. A great deal of recorded history has been deliberately distorted by Illuminati-controlled historians. Conversely, the Illuminati hierarchy maintains closely guarded and accurate records for its own purposes. According to the Illuminati, the Aryan race originated in the Lyrian constellation prior to colonizing Mars and establishing high-technology outposts on planet Earth. And if you look at paintings of King David, the biblical King David, whenever he's playing the harp, which is a very similar instrument to a lyre, he's always looking up. So here are two different depictions of King David, biblical King David, looking up at the stars. Why is he looking up when he's playing the harp? And I looked it up. Is a harp and a lyre the same thing? You know what it says? It says, the lyre of classical antiquity was originally played by being strummed. Both the harp and the lyre are stringed instruments, and both are played with a bow. Unlike the harp, which has a straight neck, the lyre has a curved neck. And what do we notice? about King David. Why is he looking up? Well, to look up, you have to curve your neck. And also something that sprung to mind is the Canongate in Edinburgh down in Holyrood. Holyrood or Holyrood means Holy Cross. Sic iter ad astra. This is the way to the stars. That's the motto of the Canongate, of the Holy Rood, the Holy Cross. And going back to the old myth about King David the First of Scotland, interesting to question where he got his name from. As in, King David of the Bible, he's looking up at the cross between the antlers of the stag or the hart. Very interesting, though, isn't it? When you think about it, when you start putting the dots together, like David Icke likes to say, you know, it's interesting to think about. This is the way to the stars. King David of Scotland looking up at the holy cross between the stag's antlers. Here's King David in the Bible. All these different depictions looking up. Why is he looking up? And the motto is, this is the way to the stars. What star? The stars we came from. Perhaps? I don't know. That's just my personal suggestion, but interesting to think about. So, King Zeusundra, a previously advanced civilization, was destroyed in a cataclysmic celestial event involving Venus, which resulted in a simultaneous global flood and ice age and reshaped the topography of Earth. As stated in the previous chapter, the Sumerian monarch, King Shusundra, who purportedly lived 6,800 years ago, was advised to construct a ship capable of withstanding a capsize. There's a depiction of it there on the right. Sounds an awful lot like Noah, doesn't it? Noah's flood. It's just another version of it. The global flood would have, worldwide, you'd have different depictions, different variations, slight differences of the same thing. So, this is not a surprise. This is basically Noah's flood, just described slightly differently, but largely the same. Hunter-gatherers. History is not linear, but rather a cyclical series of advanced civilizations interspersed with periods of devolution, which is exactly what we're in now, unfortunately. We're very much in a devolution period. In all probability, most of humanity did not survive the global flood and its accompanying ice age. In a short period of time, most of the survivors would have been reduced to hunter-gatherers, forced to live in mountain regions at high elevations until the floodwaters receded. This is what was brought up quite a lot by Graham Hancock in America before when I was listening to that. Hunter-gatherers are the only ones who survive these catastrophes and cataclysms, and will be forced to regress to a hunter-gatherer state or buddy in with those who are currently in that state in order to survive. We'll have to regress back to hunting animals and learning how to farm again and develop agricultural skills. This is brought up a lot in America before, actually. So check it out. The Gilgamesh epic. So the Gilgamesh epic states that these beings established a farming community at a place they named Eden, a lofty plain with cascading water. They taught agriculture to the local natives, then later migrated to Mesopotamia. With the passage of time, the group became deified. Ugmash was deified as the sun god Shamash by the Babylonians and as Ogma by the Irish, which is interesting. Mount Hermon. So this group survived the flood by seeking refuge near the summit of Mount Hermon. As the floodwaters receded, the survivors, originally technologically advanced alien colonizers from Mars, descended to lower terrain and established the Eden community. I think he means Eden, but he's just spelt it slightly differently. I don't know where he's quite going with that because this is what's taken straight out of the book, by the way. These are not my own words. I've just edited it down to make it more kind of streamlined. These flood survivors became known as the Anunnaki. But why does he spell it like that? This is one thing I've noticed with all these authors. Commons, Beaumont, uh, the authors behind When Scotland Was Jewish, Hirschwell, and Yeats, and now Brian Desborough. They have their own funny way of spelling things. This is a recurring pattern. Authors, I don't know whether it's subconscious or not, but they take words and they slightly reshape the spelling. Either that or Google's really wonky because if you just changed one vowel there, the Eden community. Do you mean Eden community? Why the fuck do all these authors do that? They take the only one who's not done it yet is Graham Hancock. They take all these words and they change the spelling around. Is that their way of putting their mark on it or something? They all do this. I thought Beaumont was the only one who did it. I thought he was like the worst for doing it, but they all do it. Hirschman and Yates do it. Uh, Brian Desborough does it. David Icke does it. Why the fuck did they all fucking do that? Just leave the fucking spelling as it is. Don't change it. Sorry, I'm going on a little bit of a rant there, but it's bizarre. If I become an author, do I have to change the spelling of words and make it confusing for readers just to put my stamp on it? I don't get it at all, but anyway. Just spell things fucking correctly. The Indus Valley city of Mohenjo-daro, I don't know. The Mahabharata describes how the Dravidians eventually were defeated by an invading race who flew in cigar-shaped craft and used nuclear weapons. Significantly, the remains of Mohenjo-daro contained clay pottery which had been vitrified by intense heat, and skeletons found to be quite radioactive. The Ramayana epic even describes a battle on the moon. Well, I wouldn't be surprised. We'll get to the moon eventually. The Phoenicians, curiously, many of the moon's craters have a vitrified surface as though subjected to intense heat, yet do not contain meteoric residue. At some period in the past, the moon could have been blasted with beam weaponry. Well, why is it still there then? Mars was once populated by the Aryan race, some of whom visited planet Earth prior to the flood. These colonizers became stranded on Earth when Mars was forced out of its previous orbit during the cataclysmic celestial events involving Venus. The relatively few Earthbound Martians who survived the flood, presumably losing their technologically advanced equipment in the process, was the race who recreated the civilizations of the world and became known as the Phoenicians. If Mars previously occupied our present orbit, its human inhabitants would not have required dark skins. The Cydonia region of Mars. So when Caucasians are immersed in sensory deprivation tanks for a prolonged period of time, their circadian rhythm has a frequency which corresponds to Mars. Covered this actually in one of the previous Mars Atlantis and Hollow Earth presentations. It's almost word for word what's written in The Biggest Secret, by the way. Lending credence to this postulate, tenuous though it appears, are the pyramids discovered in the Cydonia region of Mars. And they're clearly fucking pyramids. They're not tricks of light and shadow. Fucking look at them. It is unlikely that pyramids were constructed on both planets without communication between both. Yeah, look at the image on the bottom right. They're clearly pyramids. And look at the image on the top right, how, the three Mons, mountains. Hang on. There's my alarm telling me to wake up. I've been awake for hours. But look at the pyramid alignment on the Giza Plateau, how they line up with the three Mons or the three mountains on Mars, and the Sphinx lines up, and all the rest. There's clearly an alignment. There clearly is. I mean, it is fucking obvious. What evidence? I always say the greatest evidence is what is self-evident. In other words, what is obvious. In other words, what is right in front of your fucking face. Pay attention. But anyway, rant over. Sorry, but ranting. Maybe a wee bit grumpy this morning, a bit crabbit, as we say in Scotland, because I've been up since about 5 o'clock. So anyway, have a good day.